friends, welcome new and regular listeners. This is Red Ice Creations Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren and we are coming to you from Sweden in Scandinavia. Thank you for tuning in. It's good to have you along with us today. I want to take this opportunity at the beginning of the program and just say thank you for all the nice emails and positive feedback we've been getting lately. We read all our email, but because of time restraints we can't reply to everyone. We do the best we can, but it's great to hear from you and we love to get your tips and your input, so keep it coming. As you know, our website is redicecreations.com. There you can find news, radio, links, videos and much more. We also have a member section that you should definitely check out. We have our entire radio archive available there. We have extended interviews with many of our guests. We have video interviews and much more. Today on the program we have Brent Jessop. He is behind the website knowledgedrivenrevolution.com. That's knowledgedrivenrevolution.com. And we have a few very important topics that we are going to discuss today on the program. Like, for instance, the purpose and philosophy of UNESCO, the scientific outlook, and Bertrand Russell, also the Club of Rome, and much more. Brent has available on his website article series on these and many more important topics, and this is what we're going to dive into here today. So with that, let's say welcome to our guest. It's very nice to have you on the program, Brent, and thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
You know, tell us a little bit about yourself, Brent. I want to hear a little bit about your background, kind of where you're coming from, so to speak, and why and also when you started your website, knowledgedrivenrevolution.com.
There's nothing too special about my background that makes me any more qualified to talk about any of these things than anybody else. I've been born and raised in Ontario, Canada, and I have a couple degrees in engineering and whatnot. As far as why I started up the website or when, sort of a long story, I guess, but I sort of had that waking up experience way back. And I think I kind of naively jumped into trying to share that with as many people as I could. And one of the things that I did was start out the website, knowledgedrivenrevolution.com. That was back in 2005 or 2004 or something. And it initially started out as sort of a news aggregate. It was just sort of a way for me to sort of share different things that I've read, because I found sort of when I'm talking to other people, especially when you first get into this, you get so many new ideas that come your way and so many new things to share with people. A lot of the times you find yourself saying, I read this somewhere, or I read that somewhere.
Right.
That's really not good enough. You need something a little more substantial. And the memory's only so good at remembering all the sources and stuff where you got things.
Yes.
The website helped me organize these ideas and not just for myself, but as a way of sharing it as well. And from that, it kind of grew sort of with me, I guess, and the news articles and what other people were writing and whatnot sort of just wasn't quite enough for me. It wasn't expressing the different things that I wanted it to. So I sort of took the next step and started writing more and more of my own material.
Yes.
And that's kind of where it's at today, where I've sort of settled into this idea of sort of presenting different documents and different books and whatnot that are of interest, or I think are of interest, and letting the authors of these books, be it Bertrand Russell or different Club of Rome books or whatever, and let them speak for themselves.
Yes.
I don't have to elaborate too much on Bertrand Russell's views. I don't have to tell people that he thinks education is a form of propaganda. He says that very bluntly in his own books.
Yes.
So I've tried to approach it from that angle, and it takes a lot of the subjective side of it out. It's not my opinion. It's not me telling people what I think about what's going on. This is Bertrand Russell or whomever,
Mm.
saying these things themselves and gloating about it and saying how wonderful they are.
You mentioned waking up. Tell us a little bit about that and what kind of woke you up in the first place. Was it a specific event, or was it slowly but surely? How did that come about?
It's one of those things that you kind of go through. I suppose initially it feels sort of like a kind of a sudden event. I suppose, if anything, I suppose 9/11 was probably sort of that event that kind of awoke me, if you want to call it that. But the more you learn and the more you understand about things, it very quickly becomes more of a process. It's not an event where you wake up. It's a whole process, and when you reflect a bit on your own life, you can see how you reacted differently or why you would react differently, because that piece of information that sort of woke me up. You can show that exact same piece of information to somebody else, and it won't faze them at all. They could completely accept what they've seen.
Yes.
But it doesn't change anything within their lives, and it doesn't change their attitudes or opinions, and they don't see anything differently.
Well, exactly. I think that's a very good point, and I guess that this also is something that you obviously encountered, because at the beginning here you did say that you were trying to share the information that you came about with a lot of other people, and you were setting yourself up in that position to kind of awaken other people, so to speak. But did you find that actually didn't work too well, or what happened there, so to speak?
Well, I mean, it works at times, and it doesn't work at times. You sort of learn what other people are looking for too, because it's not just about you sharing something with somebody else. It's what they want to learn and what they are willing to accept or to dig for themselves. You're more. I see it more and more now as a way of trying to spark a fire within that person to learn more and to dig deeper themselves. You can't just keep sort of spoon-feeding people information. I mean, it's not a bad place to start to sort of tweak their curiosity, but it's ultimately got to come from within that other person.
Yes.
And if you don't realize that, you get very frustrated dealing with people when they just can't see things your way, or they can't take that step where you can present them something so clearly, in your mind it's so clear, and they just don't seem to care.
Right.
And they're entitled to that too. It's not something you can force on people.
Well,
even try.
Well, exactly, because that's kind of a fine line to cross as well. Because I mean, potentially we have a branch of people that actually don't want to be, shaken up or waken up from their slumber, so to speak. They're comfortable in their little zone, so to speak, and they've not asked for it, and you can actually end up doing a disservice in a way to people. Who knows?
Yeah, it is a fine line, and you have to examine yourself too. A lot of what we're sort of resisting against is the tyranny and the forcing of ideas onto other people. And as soon as you start to do the same thing, but with your version of it, are you really any better?
Very important point. Very important. Exactly. It's all about that perspective, and as you said, it's also about the internal thing, that what is within oneself, that is ultimately what wakes one up or makes one to look in a broader, for a broader perspective, or to search or to find out something more about the world we do live in. But I think that's also a good kind of place to begin this program, so to speak, before we dive into all of the article series and the more details of this, so to speak. What I like to do is to just kind of zoom out a bit and get some perspective on this and talk about, your worldview and how you see the world today, the big picture, so to speak. I mean, in a nutshell, if you can, what is going on, where are we going, and what is wrong with the world?
Sort of an enormous question, but
I know.
I'll try to give it a bit of justice.
Yes.
Generally, I think the realization has sort of sunk in that most of what we have in society has been created for us and to guide us down a path. And that path is very different than how it's sold to us. Be it different types of electronic things that are given to us, and they're given to us and they're sold to us based on for our convenience or for our happiness or for our entertainment or whatever. And there's sort of this underlying dark side to these different ideas and these different things that are given to us. And that idea lays out a lot of what you see in your day-to-day life, and you really start to pick up on all these little things that you're given, and that you start to see that you're being trained to behave in a certain way and trained to follow a certain path. And what exactly that path is, I think, is sort of the bigger question, I suppose. But that's sort of what I'm trying to do with the website, I suppose, is these different guys, be it Bertrand Russell or whoever, they lay out a version of the future that they're working towards and that they would like to see come about. And there's all kinds of different names for it, but it's essentially sort of a control freak's dream come true. It's the total surveillance and the total control over everybody else, or the vast bulk of the masses. And that's kind of where we're headed, or that's kind of how I see it headed. And then one of the big questions that comes out of that is, well, if this is the case and we are being guided towards these different things, well, who's doing it? Who's sort of on top of that pyramid that's
yes,
guiding us? And that's sort of an obvious question that comes out of it. And what I try to get across to people is that the further up the pyramid we go and the further up that we look, the vaguer and vaguer and the more sparse the information we have is. So you have to be careful not to sort of jump at, okay, this particular group is running the world and everybody else is subordinate to them.
yes,
And I think it's very tempting to do that. And when you look around the alternative media, if you want to call it that, whatever, the truth media, or all these different sort of names and slogans that are attached to it.
right,
But you see the groups develop. You see the division that occurs. There's one group that thinks, I don't know, the Catholic Church is running everything, and there's another group that thinks bankers are running everything, or whatever.
yeah,
Tons of different groups, but you see that division, and everybody sort of gets entrenched in their little thing, in their little belief, and they just sort of trash everybody else. Everybody outside their belief has now become a shill or whatever.
yes,
And that's something that should really be avoided, and it should be really clear, because you see it in so many other avenues, but when people get involved in something, it becomes a little too passionate at times, and they sort of shut down the critical thinking.
It feels like they are setting up a little bit of a tyranny of their own, so to speak, when they're doing that. And in many cases, what seems to be the red line or the connecting thread, so to speak, between all these different movements is that many people are for freedom, they're against control or tyranny, but yet through their actions of discrediting other viewpoints and so forth, I think personally that they're setting up